The logging town of Pine Hollow was no place for the faint of heart. The men worked from dawn until dusk among towering pines, swinging axes and wrestling logs downriver, their bodies hardened by frost and toil, their hearts often just as cold. And yet, one man among them, Elias Boone, the quiet lumberjack, felt a loneliness that no amount of whiskey or hard work could dull. He was a giant of a man with shoulders broad as the very trees he felled, but behind his stoic eyes hid a yearning for something more than timber and silence. So when a crude auction was announced one biting winter's day, Elias found himself drawn to the commotion, though he didn't know why. A crowd had gathered, their breath fogging in the frigid air as the auctioneer shouted about debts and brides, laughing cruelly as a woman was shoved onto the platform. She wore a sack over her head, her hands bound loosely in front of her. The men roared with laughter, tossing coins and insults, calling her a mystery prize no one wanted. Elias stood at the back, his jaw tight, his stomach twisting at the sight. He didn't know her face, didn't know her story, but something about the cruel spectacle burned him inside. "Who'll give me $1?" the auctioneer barked. The crowd jeered. No hands rose. 50 cents? More laughter. Finally, in a voice steady and deep, Elias said, $2. The crowd turned in shock, mocking him, calling him desperate, but he didn't flinch. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, grinning. "Sold to the lonely lumberjack." And just like that, with 2 crumpled bills, Elias Boone changed the course of his life forever. When the woman was led off the platform and toward him, Elias kept his head high despite the sneers. He didn't care what the town thought. He only knew that leaving her there, treated like cattle, would have haunted him more than any axe wound. He lifted her easily into his wagon, his hands rough but gentle, and drove out of town, the sound of laughter fading behind them. For a long time they traveled in silence, the crunch of snow beneath the wheels their only companion. Finally, Elias pulled the wagon to a stop by the frozen river and turned to her. "I reckon you'd like that sack off your head," he said quietly. His large fingers trembled as he untied the rope and pulled it away. For a moment he froze. She was young, though weariness had etched lines of hardship across her face. Her hair tumbled in chestnut waves, her eyes wide and fearful yet fierce. She braced as though waiting for insult. But Elias simply stared, then cleared his throat awkwardly. "Name?" She hesitated, lips trembling, before whispering, "Maria." The sound of it struck him like a hymn sung in the pines, simple, pure and alive. Elias swallowed, nodding once. "Maria," he repeated softly, tasting the syllables like a promise. She looked at him strangely then, as though shocked he had not laughed, mocked, or cursed. Instead, Elias reached into the back of the wagon, pulling out his worn coat and draped it around her shoulders. "You'll freeze without it," he said. For the first time in years, Maria's eyes glistened with tears not of pain but of unexpected kindness. And though neither spoke of it, something fragile and unbreakable sparked between them that cold winter's night. Life in the lumberjack's cabin was rough and simple, but Elias worked hard to make Maria feel safe. He stoked the fire until the hearth glowed, carved her a sturdy chair from oak, and even built shelves for the few belongings she brought. Maria moved like a bird, unsure if the cage was open, hesitant and quiet, often startled by the creak of the floorboards. She had been mocked, discarded, and nearly broken by the cruelty of others. But here Elias did not demand or degrade. He simply lived beside her, chopping wood in the dawn, hauling water from the stream, inviting her wordlessly to share his meals. At first Maria ate timidly, afraid to take too much. But when Elias gently pushed the larger portion toward her without a word, she finally allowed herself a true bite, warmth spreading through her chest. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Maria began to hum while sweeping, to mend torn shirts with delicate hands, to look Elias in the eye without flinching. One night, as snow buried the world outside, Maria whispered, "Why did you pay for me?" Elias stared into the fire, his voice rough when he answered, "Because no one should be left in chains, laughed at like that. You deserved better." Tears slipped down Maria's cheeks, for no man had ever spoken of her worth before. And though Elias's words were few, they sank into her soul like roots finding soil. From that moment, Maria knew, though she had been bought for $2, her freedom had come at the highest price. The heart of a lonely lumberjack, but the world beyond the cabin wasn't ready to forget her past. When Elias took Maria into town one spring morning, The stares and whispers returned, sharper than the wind. "There's the sackhead bride," someone sneered. Men laughed openly, women rolled their eyes, children pointed. Maria's hands shook as she clutched the basket of flour and beans, shame threatening to crush her. Elias saw it in her eyes, the weight of every cruel word she'd endured. Without hesitation, he stepped closer, his large frame a shield, his voice booming loud enough for all to hear. "This woman's name is Maria Boone," he declared firmly. "She's my wife, and she's worth more than every log I'll ever cut." The market fell silent, his words echoing in the cold morning air. Maria's heart pounded as he took her hand in his, lacing his calloused fingers through hers for all to see. For the first time, she didn't feel like property or a joke. She felt claimed, not as a prize, but as a partner. And when a small child tugged on her skirt and asked, "Miss, why were you laughing at?" Maria knelt down and smiled through tears, answering softly, "Because sometimes people don't see what's real." Elias's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders as they walked away together, leaving the town stunned into silence. That night, in the quiet of their cabin, Maria whispered, "Why did you call me wife?" Elias looked at her, eyes steady. "Because you are." Her lips parted, her breath caught, and in that single moment, Maria felt the shackles of her past fall away forever. The seasons rolled on, and with them, a love deeper than either had dared dream took root. Maria laughed more often now, her voice mingling with the wind in the pines, and Elias found himself smiling at her every word. They worked side by side, he with his axe, she with her gentle hands tending the home, each moment binding them tighter. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Elias stood awkwardly by the fire, shifting on his feet. Maria looked up from her sewing, curiosity in her gaze. He cleared his throat, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Maria, I ain't good with words, but I reckon you should know. You're the best thing that ever came to me. You're more than a wife. You're my heart." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she set her sewing aside and crossed the room, placing her hands against his chest. "And you," she whispered, "are the first man who ever saw me. Not the sack, not the shame, me." Elias bent, pressing his forehead against hers, his breath trembling. In that small cabin, surrounded by the scent of pine and the crackle of fire, two broken souls found the one thing they never thought they'd have: wholeness. The lonely lumberjack, who had once bought a woman for $2, now held in his arms the greatest treasure of all, a love that no cruelty, no laughter, no past could ever steal. And as Maria whispered his name like a prayer, Elias Boone knew that sometimes the smallest choices, the quietest acts of kindness, could change everything forever. And that, friends, was the story of the lonely lumberjack who paid $2 not to own a woman, but to save her, and in turn, discovered the love of his life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful Wild West stories of love, redemption, and courage.